Hey, let's talk to Brandon Maxwell about his film, American Homeboy. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Thanks for being on the show today. Really good to talk to you. Your film, American Homeboy, which we will look at the trailer, is a film that you've been working on for years. And I tell you, I feel for you. Um, uh, Archival docs are some of the hardest docs to make. Tell us about the movie.
Well, so it was first of all, it's Brandon Lauren Maxwell. That's gonna drive me crazy.
All right,
So,
I'm gonna fix it right now.
yeah,
I'm gonna
that's a
fix
fashion
it.
designer. Okay, there you go.
All
Um,
right,
so just so if somebody wants to find me, because otherwise they're gonna find a fashion designer.
there we go.
Uh,
Done.
so yeah, we worked on this film for about 3 years. We had found some old archival footage in an archive in California that came from a defunct cable access station. And there was a camera guy who worked at that cable access station who would take the camera and go and film stuff, and he had his own show. And he donated all the reels to the city, and then later passed away. But when we found that archival footage, I thought it was amazing, and we were able to talk to the filmmaker Juan Espinoza before he died. We purchased the rights, and then we used AI to restore all of that archival footage. And then I linked up with somebody over at Netflix who had a good camera and worked a deal out, and then went around, did some interviews for about 3 years, and then I edited the film, and we got it into theaters and sold out about 35 cities, and then got 3 distribution offers, and now we're on Apple TV.
Well, I'll tell you this. You say that in such a glib, easy way, like it was all simple. I've been on that journey. I know how hard it is, the stages you go through, and the AI upscaling. I have this whole obsession where I watch like movies from the early 1900s
Yeah.
of like Paris or New York, and their AI upscaled to like 24 FPS
Hmm.
that look incredible. And we did some of that on my documentary, Attack of the Doc. It's really, really good.
Yeah. It's really amazing that these types of tools are accessible by people who don't have a lot of money now. I mean, you can do so much. You can pay like a monthly subscription fee and get access to all these amazing tools that you didn't even have 20 years ago. So, I mean, I know that there's a lot of doom and gloom in relation to movie making and the Hollywood and the arts, but I feel like never before has there been so much opportunity to create and to get your work out there. I think the key is you have to think unconventionally. You know, the way that things used to be done, that's done. That's old. That's wayside right now. And there's still avenues to get your stuff out there more than ever. But you have to kind of get outside of the how things have traditionally been done.
Now, you described the process of making and releasing this movie in 20 seconds. I want to take each part and go into
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
The first part, the archival, you discovered the footage and the topic.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're passionate about this topic because most documentary filmmakers I know don't have butlers. It's not going to get you rich, so
Yeah.
you have to be passionate about it. So, breaking down the footage, how do you? They say it takes at minimum like 100 hours of footage to make a doc. How many hours did you have? How did you log it? What was the process of going through and finding like, oh, that moment right there, or like what was that process of just getting a handle on what you had to tell a story?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'll say, you mentioned having passion and why that's important. I didn't realize that going in. I was passionate, but I didn't understand why people said you needed to be passionate. And now that I've done it, the reason you need to be passionate is because when you're doing these types of projects that are really long-term projects, it took me roughly 4 years from beginning to end, from concept to Apple TV. You're going to have lots of ups and downs along the way. And when you hit those ruts and you're in those lows, the way that you get through them is the passion that you feel for what you're doing. That's what sustains you. That is your gas. And so it is important to be passionate about whatever subject you're going to tackle because it's going to take a while to get through. You take these on in a very incremental approach, a little at a time. So with us, roughly, I had about 20 terabytes of footage, and at the time, I didn't know a lot about that, but now that I know, it's a lot of footage. But it's also when you're dealing with 4K footage, that also adds to the space.
Right.
Um, I think one of the things that I didn't expect that turned out to be a huge expense for me was backing up all of that footage. I think we going in, you think about, okay, well, I need drives to store the footage. But the truth is, you need like double or triple the drives because you need to have
Right.
and backups of backups, and you need to store them in different places in case there's a fire and all this different stuff. So, moving the footage around and preserving it actually turned into like a thorn in my side throughout the process. But once you get that squared away, it's really just being organized in terms of what you have and logging it and things like that.
It's we should take a look at the trailer for the film so we can get a sense of the footage. But I want to ask the title, American Homeboy. Um, you now fit into the pantheon of movies that begin with the title American, which I love. I love that.
Yeah.
I love movies that do that. So where'd you come up with the title?
Well, it's an American story for one.
Mhm.
And so I thought that that fit into it. You know, it's about young Mexican American youth that had dealt with government discrimination in the 40s, and out of that came this evolution of this like kind of unique, flamboyant, defiant subculture that we think of as cholo culture and lowrider culture and pachuco culture. And these were young Mexican Americans. They were Americans too. They were born here, but often looked at as outsiders. So in that world, in that subculture, people often refer to each other as homeboys. And so I just thought American homeboy it was catchy. They were two phrases that came up throughout the movie. And so that's what we ended up calling it.
Cool. Let's take a look at the trailer so people get a sense of it, and then we'll continue talking. I have it right here. So, see, so people know this is real. We leave all the mistakes in. We have a conversation.
Sure.
So I have it right here queued up. Let's take a look here. All
Pachucos were rounded up, beaten down, had their clothes cut off of them, their hair cut, publicly humiliated, and then arrested.
There's no weapon produced ever. There's no eyewitness produced ever. There was no confession that was ever produced.
And a lot of it had to do with the media saying that these Mexican gangs were terrorizing neighborhoods. They were robbers, they were rapists, they were murderers.
Criminals, they're thieves, they're immoral.
And again, I remind you that studies have looked at arrest rates and all these kinds of things, and there is no demonstrable evidence that juvenile delinquency was actually a problem, but people were worried about it.
Here you had kids, young people that were freely engaging and enjoying their First Amendment right to freedom of expression. And they were beaten for it because they were perceived as an anti-American threat.
The Zoot Suiters might have had a more communal understanding of the representation of their neighborhood. But when that evolved from Pachuco to Cholo, that all changed. And that became, that's when the gang culture really spawned, and it took on a whole new meaning. So if you put your neighborhood on you were gonna either live, die, or kill for that tattoo.
It was Pachuco, but then it became eventually Cholo. It became a whole different way of doing things that nobody had done before.
footage looks amazing. You're bracketing that with like updated stuff. But
Yeah, in that particular scene, it's funny that actually doesn't have a lot of archival footage till the end of it. That has more photos, and then we have a few modern scenes to kind of play out that narrative. In a few of our scenes that are in the 1930s, 1940s, we kind of intercut different footage to kind of tell the story because we're limited on what we have. Once we get into the 60s through the 80s and 70s and 90s, then we have a lot of archival footage. So.
did you have to go through outside sources or services? There are services
Yeah.
out there where you can license the rights to footage for your film.
Well, so I had mixed feelings about this. One, I didn't want to use stuff that everybody was always using or had used in the past. It's part of the reason why I like this project is I would say about 40% of it is stuff that most people have never seen. Um, we worked with the National Archives. We worked with Ford Motor Company. We worked with a lot of different places. If you're going to go the licensing route, documentaries are really expensive, and it can really add up. There was some footage we wanted to use at I think it was UCLA, and you're talking 3 grand, 4 grand, 5 grand to use, 10 seconds of footage. It can really add up. And it's a huge barrier to entry for aspiring documentary filmmakers, which is why you don't see a lot of archival historical documentaries being made anymore, like outside of like Ken Burns, who has this massive budget. And so it's a little bit frustrating. What I did that made it work is I actually approached a lot of these people in one on one. I went around some of these licensing services and approached the photographers and then said, "Hey, it's too expensive. Can we work something out just between us?" And all of them said yes, except for one person who I spoke with. And so we are able to save a lot of money just by having people who wanted to be on board with the project.
Yeah, it really does help if you make a personal approach. I mean, there are set prices. I've heard of, you know, 5 grand a minute for certain services, but if you approach them, if you pitch them the project, if you let them know, hey, I'm just a guy trying to make a film, I find a lot of places will work with you.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, no, yeah, that's right. I think most people in the arts and they want to make films, they want to make
right.
projects. I think they're just trying to find this weird balance between um, making it profitable and trying to get some money back and also creating art. And so though, most of these companies when they get involved, of course they're going to start on the high end, but as far as the actual people who took the photos and the videos, almost all of them want to work on something. So,
You said that you did the whole thing from soup to nuts in like 4 years. That's really short. I mean, that's fast. Average is about 7 years, and a lot of docs I know took over a decade.
yeah.
So it's impressive one to make the movie and then release it. It's something we don't always talk about is the release phase of a film. So in addition to the trailers, there are multiple trailers. You've got a website. How did you get this on Apple? Like, and I want to
Yeah.
talk about your theatrical too, but
Sure. Yeah. Well, so going into this, I wanted to take a different approach in general. I knew that most major theaters and streamers were not going to believe there was an audience for this type of film. And so the approach that I took was I needed to be as clever as possible with social media, and I needed to get it out in front of the audience to prove to distributors that an audience existed. And so I built a website. As you see, you're on it right now, American
right.
Homeboy. Um, I planned out our first trailer 6 months in advance. I did not put anything out or any inkling of anything before then. In this day and age, everybody wants to be the first one on social media. I was very deliberate to make sure that I put it out on a Tuesday, not a Monday, because everybody's checking their emails. On a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and when there's no political events, no sporting events, anything like that, so I could kind of have the attention of everybody. And I created a trailer that I thought would do really well on social media. And that wasn't the trailer that you just showed. Our
Right.
original trailer did something like 10 million views on TikTok. It
Okay.
was crazy. So it served its purpose.
Well, I'll say
Um,
I'm impressed that there's merch. Shop American Homeboy. That's great. I love this
thanks.
shirt. Never forget 1943. And this poster here with the colors of the American flag, American Homeboy
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
amazing. I
Yeah,
mean,
thanks.
really,
Yeah, so a little
really good
story
stuff.
behind that image. If you click on it, I'll show people the image. So that was the original poster before we went to Apple, and that's what we used in the initial theaters and things like that. And when I created that poster, I went and hired somebody who is a punk rock artist who does
Mhm.
punk rock show posters. And I went to him and I said, "Hey, this is what I want to do." And he said, "Well, I don't make movie posters." And I was like, "That's exactly why I want you. I want somebody who doesn't make movie posters. I wanted to have sort of this like punk rock aesthetic, but with like the all of the elements that involve this subculture, kind of like a montage or a collage." And so that's what he came up with. And it just coincidentally, that back tattoo turned out to be done by one of the tattoo artists who appear in the film, just coincidentally. So that was awesome. But yeah, there's this like kind of boring show posters that they have today and movie posters.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to get stuck in that because I knew that we needed to be as strong as possible with our social media rollout and our imagery to get people interested in the film. And it worked. The film took off. We I rented out a theater. It all started out with me renting out one theater. I put up like 3 grand, 4 grand, rented a theater. We did a big show just to get word out about the film. Well, we filled that theater, and so I thought to myself, well, maybe we'll do one more theater. We didn't have plans for any more. We did another showing in LA, and this time we sold tickets, and it sold out like that. And then we said, okay, maybe we'll do another one because then we started getting contacted by other cities like San Jose and San Francisco and Sacramento and all these places. So we started renting out theaters and we would put up none of them would do ticket splits initially. They were all like, you need to just buy the theater out. And then if you want to sell the tickets, go ahead. So we would put up 3 grand, 4 grand to rent out a theater and then we would sell it out. Well, what happened is we ended up selling out 35 cities. And about halfway through that process, theaters would no longer rent us the theater. They started saying, "No, you have to do ticket splits with us," because then they saw we were filling the theaters.
Yeah, because they make more money that way. That's
Right.
called, for
So
people that don't know, that's called four-walling. You rent the theater like you would rent anything. You sell the tickets for wherever you want,
Mhm.
but 35 cities is insane. How'd you find the network of theaters? Did you just one recommended another? Did they come to you?
Well, it
How
was
did you
funny.
find?
Yeah, it was funny because I didn't know that you did it another way. I thought that's how
Mhm.
you got into theaters.
Right,
so
right.
so I was going to theaters and talking to them one on one, and then we had a number of theaters that also approached us along the way as word continued to get out. But we did 400 people in Tucson. We did 400 people in Portland. We did 500 people in Sacramento. We did 400 people in LA like 3, 4, 5 times. We did Colorado. We did as far away as Maine. We did Ohio. And all of these were huge crowds. And I knew that we really had something that was popular when theaters stopped letting us rent them out, when they started saying ticket splits only. But what we did is we kind of went backwards. We did theaters and universities for a whole 12 months. And then we went to AFM and then we went to distributors and said, hey, we just sold out all these theaters with no agent, no studio. Don't tell me there's not demand. And we got 3 distribution offers out of AFM. So I went back and forth with distributors for about 8 months. There was a point where because I didn't want to sell the film. And so there was one point where everybody walked away from me. Like my lawyer, I hired an entertainment attorney and he was mad at me because I wouldn't take the deal. The distributors were mad at me because basically I didn't want to give up the rights to everything because I saw like long-term potential. And so they walked away, I walked away, but then everybody came back to the table and eventually they let me carve out all the rights that I wanted. And so we kept uh, SVOD rights to keep the movie on our own website if we wanted. We kept educational rights. We kept DVD rights. We kept ancillary merchandise rights. And then I just licensed them transactional video on demand rights and ad video on demand rights.
Yeah, and
So I,
people
I
that don't
never
know,
sold.
yeah, people that don't know, AFM is the American Film Market. It's normally in Santa Monica. They moved it to Las Vegas this year, but
Yeah.
that's where anyone can go. You can go as a filmmaker. I have a movie. Do you want to buy it? That's how you connect with buyers. And what you did, I got to compliment you by doing the theatrical yourself. What you did is you increased the stock value, perceived value of your film. You made it worth more money by building that market or proving that there was a market and doing the marketing yourself. That amazing poster that we looked at earlier, that like proves like, hey, this has value. You have to pay attention.
Yeah,
So
we made over double our money back before we even licensed it to a major streamer.
wow. It's
And so, it worked out. And so now everything is just, uphill for us from that point. But again, that's one of those things where I didn't realize going in that everybody loses money. I mean, even the distributors are like, what? You made money?
right,
Everybody's so used to losing money. And I'm like, well, yeah, isn't
right.
that the point? Like, isn't like I
Yeah.
have it. If I want to make more projects, doesn't it have to work? And so, a lot of this stuff, I feel like I benefited from being ignorant on some of these things and just going with what I thought we should do. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, you don't know you can't do certain things, but carving out rights, that's something right there. You kept DVD, you
Yeah.
kept certain rights, like educational. People don't realize, like, you can be hired as a speaker to
Yeah.
go to a school.
Right. And I would have given all that up. And I do a lot of
r-
universities, so that's why I didn't want to give it up.
And I hope you get a good fee because I know that they've got budgets. They bring you in, you show the film, then you speak to students. So that is really valuable also. And filmmakers don't know. They think they sell the movie, they sell all the rights. No, some, and for a limited time. The windows anywhere from 3 to 7 years
Yeah.
usually for licensing.
Yeah,
So
and here's the thing, if you sell a film to say Netflix, so say Netflix comes and buys the film, and for
right.
most films, they're probably, if you're not like an A-list director or something, they're probably giving you 30,000 to 50,000, if you're lucky. They take that and they own it forever. That also means they can shelve it at any point. If they decide not to have it on their platform anymore, just it's not in there, it's not in there. There's nothing you can do about it. It's gone. You don't get any educational, any books, any nothing. And you just took that first upfront payment and that's it. You're on your next project. And so for me, I really saw like long-term potential with this. And so even if it ever got shelved by the distributors we're working with or anything like that, it doesn't impact us because I kept the rights still to have it on our own website and our app, and I kept all the other rights as well. And for those of you that don't know, what I did while we were playing in the theaters is we raised money and built 3 apps on iOS, Roku, and Android, so people could stream it on the app, so we could get it out there and create subscribers and things like that. And so again, all of this was before we licensed the film to Apple. So the fact that Apple was one of them that took up the film, it was crazy enough that they took a documentary about low riding and cholo culture. But it was even, I think, crazier that we had done all this beforehand, you know?
Well, I gotta say, it's rare. To be successful as a filmmaker is so hard because you have the one side, you got to be really creative. That's one side of your brain. The
Yeah.
other side, you got to be really savvy business person. And the people who tend to succeed in film and in indie film have they're both creative and business savvy and control and hold onto certain rights. Everyone from like George Lucas, people say George Lucas, Star Wars. Look, he's the most successful indie filmmaker alive, but the concept is still valid. Holding that control because you know your film better than anyone.
Yeah, and in retros, and there was a time when I thought to myself, well, maybe did I make the wrong decision? But after going through the distribution process, even that's when I knew I absolutely had made the right decision because, as thankful as I am to have the film distributed, the distributors don't know our audience like I know the audience. And that was clear in the marketing and talking to them and their rollout and things like that. And so I think had I not done that, I don't think the film would have been seen as much as it has been, and it probably would have been more of like a botched rollout. So yeah.
Well, it's incredibly successful. What's next? Will there be a follow-up film? What are
I
you
don't know.
working on?
Well, I wrote a screenplay during that time, and then I wrote a book. I have a book coming out in like a month, and then I have a screenplay that I'd like to do at some point. But we started filming like a short limited series called Defiant History, and the series follows different outlaw subcultures that were outsider subcultures, and then ultimately later became mainstream American subcultures. And so I'm fascinated by outsiders and subcultures. And so like we sit down with graffiti artists and bikers and all types of different people that, at one point they were on the fringes of American society, but now they're basically Americana when you think of America.
Right.
And so the series is shot kind of like Anthony Bourdain's Unknown Parts, except you're talking to different subcultures and things like that. So it's called Defiant History, and we're hoping to roll out first few episodes next year.
Oh, nice. I mean, you built up the infrastructure. You have all these contacts. You've made deals. You now can go back to the same people, say, "Hey, here's my new thing."
Yeah, no, that's absolutely 100% correct. And, we hope that, for the company, my startup company, that we're able to raise a little bit more money to do future projects and say, hey, look, we've established a foundation, we have connections. We don't have to go through this whole AFM or pitching process. We can just go back to our distributor. So
Absolutely.
that was the goal.
Absolutely. You've got this, and I'm excited, man. You really built it up. And this is like, how did you even, like, to go back a sec,
Yeah.
how did you even have the savvy to know to do all that stuff? Because a lot of filmmakers spend years learning what you instinctively knew. Did you just not take no for an answer? Or like, how did
uh,
you get
which
here?
depends which part of the process. You mean just in general?
Just like the selling of it, just because I think there's so much education. You can watch stuff on YouTube, you can
Mhm.
read stuff online, but it really is a massive amount of info. I mean, look, I think formal education is fine,
Mhm.
but in terms of indie film, you can learn everything. It's all out there online in some
Yeah.
form.
Well, I learned a lot watching Film Courage, and
Nice.
it was amazing for Film Courage to have this full 360 where Film Courage then asked me to be on the show
Yeah,
and then do
right.
an interview when I learned a lot from Film Courage. I'm very OCD, and so I would say that played a huge role in me getting through this process that seems really long to everybody, because I'm just very stubborn. I think the other thing is I'm kind of a control freak. And so I like to control everything that has to do with me and try to control things as much as possible so I have a predictable outcome and I can control what types of risks that I take. And I like to take risks, but I also like to take smart risks. And so I think that being OCD and hyper obsessive and also wanting to control things, I think it just made it to where I was able to carve out everything that I wanted, and I felt like we had shown there was an audience enough to where I sensed that they would give in a little bit, and they did. So,
Well, I'll say
and you have to be willing to take that risk because look, I could have burnt that bridge, and we just could have
right.
lost all our offers. But if I'm being honest, like I kind of enjoy that. Like I think it's fun. Like that I used to take a lot of risks growing up when I was young, and I feel like I've been able to supplement some of that rush that I miss now in the business world, where I just get to, you're still risk. You can take these risks, and maybe you blow up the company, or maybe you don't get the film deal that you wanted. But I like to swing for the fences and just see what happens. It's fun either way. I mean, I'm fortunate to just be doing this.
Well, let's say some of the most successful filmmakers are very OCD about, and a lot of even the studio directors, they write in that they get approval over poster, trailer,
Yeah.
marketing materials. I mean, I hear all the stories. So
Well,
you've got the whole skill set.
I'll say two other things. So one, I had a friend that I met early on named Jordan, who's worked as a line producer at a number of places like Nickelodeon and things like that. And he was very helpful to kind of schooling me on the Hollywood mentality. And he was one of my early mentors, who I ran into and had a chance to get to know. Now, as far as OCD goes, now we have a mutual friend in Polly over at the Latino
Yes.
Slant.
Yeah.
So
Love Polly.
Polly will vouch for you how OCD I can be because he was helping me with some things and he kept getting a color wrong. And it was driving me crazy that the color was just slightly off a shade. And he will tell you, I drove him crazy because I could see if just one little thing was off and I wouldn't let it go. I can't let it go. I can't sleep if it's not the way it needs to be. And so, it's really like a double-edged sword, I mean, it's something that can drive me nuts all day or all week or all month if something is not the way it should be, but it also, I think, pushes me through to get projects done and to get things done, so
Well, congratulations. The film is a huge success. Your upcoming series sounds like it's going to be amazing. I have one last question. This doc seems like it would make a good narrative feature. Are do you now, since you've made the doc, technically you could do the narrative story based on your own documentary. I know of filmmakers who've done that because
mhm.
it's cheaper to make a doc than a narrative feature. Is that
Yeah.
in your future plans?
Probably not. I'll probably leave it at this. And I wrote a drama. I would love to direct the drama at some point. And you know, but I probably wouldn't expand on this project too much. I think that this will be it for this area, and I'll move on to the next area and continue, you know, the company will continue to focus on things that I think are socio-political, Latino-based films, but what it looks like, it probably won't look like this again.
And people can find you by going to AmericanHomeboy.com.
Yeah, they can find the film at AmericanHomeboy.com. It's on Apple TV right now, American Homeboy, and you can follow me, Brandon Lauren Maxwell, and I'm most active on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, or
Well,
X, shall I say.
Exactly. And don't forget that name, Brandon Lauren Maxwell. Brandon, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris.